Page 13, 213, Signet Classic. For to change one's mind, or even one's policy, is a confession of weakness. If, for example, Eurasia or East Asia, whichever it may be, is the enemy today, then that country must always have been the enemy. And if the facts say otherwise, then the facts must be altered, thus destroy the continuously... Thus
history is continuously rewritten.
Oh, thank you. Thus history is continuously rewritten. This day-to-day falsification of the past, carried out by the Ministry of Truth, is as necessary to the stability of the regime as the work of repression and espionage carried out by the Ministry of Love. The mutability of the past, mutability, changeability, is the central tenet of INGSOC. Past events, it is argued, have no objective existence but survive only in written records and in human memories. The past is whatever the records and the memories agree upon, and since the party is in full control of all records and in equally full control of the minds of its members, it follows that the past is whatever the party chooses to make it. It also follows that though the past is alterable, it never has been altered in any specific instance. For when it has been recreated in what... Hold on.
That would be for me.
For when it has been recreated in whatever shape is needed at the moment, then this new version is the past, and no different past can ever have existed. This holds good even when, as often happens, the same event has to be altered out of recognition several times in the course of a year. At all times, the party is in possession of absolute truth, and clearly the absolute can never have been different from what it is now. It will be seen that the control of the past depends above all on the training of memory. Top of 214. To make sure that all written records agree with the orthodoxy of the moment is merely a mechanical act, orthodoxy old. But it is also necessary to remember that events happened in the desired manner, and if it is necessary to rearrange one's memories or to tamper with written records, then it is necessary to forget that one has done so. The trick of doing this can be learned like any other mental technique. It is learned by the majority of party members, and certainly by all who are intelligent as well as orthodox. In old speak, it's called, quite frankly, reality control. In new speak, it's called doublethink, although doublethink comprises much else as well. Doublethink means the power of holding two contradictory beliefs in one's mind simultaneously and accepting both of them. The party intellectual knows in which direction his memories must be altered. He therefore knows that he is playing tricks with reality, but by the exercise of doublethink, he also satisfies himself that reality is not violated. The process has to be conscious, or it would not be carried out with sufficient precision, but it also has to be unconscious, or it would bring with it a feeling of falsity and hence of guilt. Doublethink lies at the very heart of INGSOC, since the essential act of the party is to use conscious deception while retaining the firmness of purpose that goes with complete honesty, to tell deliberate lies while genuinely believing in them, to forget any fact that has become inconvenient, and then, when it becomes necessary again, to draw it back from oblivion for just so long as it is needed, to deny the existence of objective reality, and all the while to take account of the reality which one denies. All this is indispensably necessary. Even in using the word doublethink, it is necessary to exercise doublethink, for by using the word, one admits that one is tampering with reality. By a fresh act of doublethink, one erases this knowledge, and so on indefinitely, with the lie always one leap ahead of the truth. Big lie. Ultimately, it is by means of doublethink the party has been able, and may, for all we know, continue to be able for thousands of years, to arrest the course of history. Those that control the past control the future. All past oligarchies. Biden mentioned this word several times. Behind Trump at the speech were four tens and tens and tens of billionaires. Couple hundred billionaires. They were directly behind him, in better seats than the family, in better seats than the elected politicians. All past oligarchies have fallen from power either because they ossified or because they grew soft. Either they became stupid and arrogant, failed to adjust themselves to changing circumstances, and were overthrown, or they became liberal and cowardly, made concessions when they should have used force, and once again were overthrown. They fell, that is to say, either through consciousness or through unconsciousness. It is the achievement of the party to have produced a system of thought in which both conditions can exist simultaneously, and upon no other intellectual basis could the dominion of the party be made permanent. If one is to rule and to continue ruling, one must be able to dislocate the sense of reality, for the secret of rulership is to combine a belief in one's own infallibility. Infallible. You can't mess with me. You can't defeat me, basically. I don't have any weaknesses. The infallibility with the power to learn from past mistakes. Please be marking. I really want to be able to find that, especially that whole thing. It really goes well with the whiteboard and your vignettes. Thank you. I know a lot of you are doing this topic for your vignettes. It need hardly be said that the subtlest practitioners of doublethink are those who invented doublethink and know that it is a vast system of mental cheating. In our society, those who have the best knowledge of what is happening are also those who are furthest from seeing the world as it is. In general, the greater the understanding, the greater the delusion. The more intelligent, the less sane. One clear illustration of this is the fact that war hysteria increases in intensity as one rises in the social scale. War hysteria, hyping those whose attitude toward the war is most nearly rational and are the subject peoples of the disputed territories. To these people, the war is simply a continuous calamity which sweeps to and fro over their bodies like a tidal wave. Which side is winning is a matter of complete indifference to them. They are aware that a change of overlordship means simply that they will be doing the same work as before for new masters who treat them in the same manner as the old ones. The slightly more favored workers, whom we call the proles, are only intermittently, top of 216, conscious of the war. When it's necessary, they can be prodded into frenzies of fear and hatred, but when left to themselves, they are capable of forgetting for long periods that the war is happening. It is in the ranks of the party, and above all, in the inner party, that the true war enthusiasm is found. World conquest is believed in most firmly by those who know it to be impossible. This peculiar linking together of opposites, knowledge with ignorance, cynicism with fanaticism, is one of the chief distinguishing marks of oceanic society. The official ideology abounds with contradictions, even where there is no practical reason for them. Thus, the party rejects and vilifies every principle for which the socialist movement originally stood, and it chooses to do this in the name of socialism. It preaches a contempt for the working class, unexampled for centuries past, and it dresses its members in a uniform which was at one time peculiar to manual workers, as was adopted for that reason. So that might be good for you, Simon, in your box, because you have blue overalls. Members in a uniform. It systematically undermines the solidarity of the family, and it calls its leader by a name which is a direct appeal to the sentiment of family loyalty. Even the names of the four ministries by which we are governed exhibit a sort of impudence in their deliberate reversal of the facts. The ministry of peace concerns itself with war, the ministry of truth with lies, the ministry of love with torture, and the ministry of plenty with starvation. These contradictions are not accidental, nor do they result from ordinary hypocrisy. They are deliberate exercises. Yeah, they're all designed. You could not do this to a citizenry that was awake. They would have to be numbed. TikTok numb, Reels numb, YouTube short numb. Ordinary hypocrisy, they are deliberate exercises in doublethink. For it is only by reconciling contradictions that power can be retained indefinitely. In no other way could the ancient cycle be broken. If human equality is to be forever averted, if the high, as we've called them, are to keep their places permanently, then the prevailing mental condition must be controlled. Insanity. But there is one question which until this moment we have almost ignored. It is, why should human equality be averted? Supposing that the mechanics of the process have been rightly described, top of 217, what is the motive for this huge, accurately planned effort to freeze history at a particular moment of time. Here we reach the central secret. As we've seen, the mystique of the party, and above all, the inner party, depends upon doublethink. But deeper than this lies the original motive, the never questioned instinct that first led to the seizure of power and brought doublethink, the thought police, continuous warfare, and all the other necessary paraphernalia into existence afterwards. The motive really consists. So we got right there, we got 3 of our 7 on the board. Winston. I think we're done with the manual.
Winston.
Well, it's just the Goldstein treatise is a lot.
That was a long bit.
Yeah, it's like 30 pages.
Honestly, it's been the most helpful to me for my essay, though.
It's almost like why didn't Orwell put that at the beginning of the book?
Because he needed to actually find the someone who is in the double-sided.
He had no knowledge of this previously, and Winston is the narrative character, so he couldn't have
Okay.
spoiled the book.
Yeah, that's why it's O'Brien.
Fine.
That's why it's O'Brien, because he was there in the beginning.
Ooh. Winston became aware of silence as one becomes aware of a new sound. It seemed to him that Julia had been very still for some time past. She was lying on her side, naked from the waist upwards, with her cheek pillowed on her hand and one dark lock tumbling across her eyes. Her breast rose and fell slowly and regularly. Julia? No answer. Julia, are you awake? No answer. She was asleep. He shut the book, put it carefully on the floor, lay down and pulled the coverlet over both of them. He had still, he reflected, not learned the ultimate secret. He understood how, he did not understand why. Chapter 1, like Chapter 3, had not actually told him anything that he did not know. It had merely systematized the knowledge that he possessed already. But after reading it, he knew better than before that he was not mad. Being in a minority, even a minority of one, did not make you mad. There was truth and there was untruth. And if you clung to the truth, even against the whole world, you were not mad. A yellow beam from the sinking sun slanted in through the window and fell across the pillow. He shut his eyes. The sun on his face and the girl's smooth body touching his own gave him a strong, sleepy feeling, confident feeling. He was safe. Everything was all right. He fell asleep, murmuring, "Sanity is not statistical," with the feeling that this remark contained in it a profound wisdom. Section 2, Orwell's 1984, Section 2, Chapter 10. When he woke, it was the sensation of having slept for a long time, but a glance at the old-fashioned clock told him that it was only 20:30. He lay dozing for a little while. Then the usual deep-lunged singing struck up from the yard below. It was only an hopeless fancy, it passed like an April day, but a look and a word and the dreams that stood, they have stolen my heart away. They have stolen my heart away. The driveling song seemed to have, I feel like I sounded like George Harrison there for a second. The driveling song seemed to have kept its popularity. You still heard it all over the place. It had outlived the hate song. Julia woke at the sound, stretched herself luxuriously, and got out of bed. I'm hungry. Let's make some more coffee. Damn, the stove's gone out and the water's cold. She picked the stove up and shook it. There's no oil in it. We can get some from old Charrington, I expect. The funny thing is that I've made sure it was full. I'm going to put my clothes on. It seems to have gotten colder. Winston also got up and dressed himself. The indefatigable voice sang on. They say that time heals all things. They say you can always forget. But the smiles and the tears across the years, they twist my heartstrings yet. Top of 219. I love it when writers make me sound like a cockneyed. Cockney is like southern drawl in England. It's called Cockney, and it's like kind of the uneducated accent, like southern accent. I mean, I think we kind of think of it as that of less educated.
Because the way the grammar is.
Maybe I shouldn't say that on broadcast media, but I think we all know what I'm talking
Cancel
about.
Titan.
Yeah, you're getting canceled.
Cancel
No,
him.
it's,
He's anti-British.
it's the working class.
We all agree. Come on.
It's the working class accent. So that's kind of associated with lower education.
Yes.
Like Indiana.
Pardon? Miscellaneous drawer. There should be a little sheet in there.
Oh, sandpaper? Yeah.
Okay, 219. As he fastened the belt of his overalls. So did you catch that? Julia said, before we went to sleep, I made sure there was oil in the stove. Weird. How come there's no?
Someone came and stole it.
Mm.
I wonder if someone did come and steal it. I do that a lot and I predict it and I'm like smart. So we'll see. We'll see if I can predict the future.
As he fastened his belt of his overalls, he strolled across to the window. The sun had gone down. The sun must have gone down behind the houses. It was not shining into the yard longer. The flagstones were wet as they had just been washed, and he had the feeling that the sky had been washed too. So fresh and pale was the blue between the chimney pots. Tireless, the women marched to and fro, corking and uncorking herself, singing and falling silent and pegging out more diapers and more and more. He wondered whether she took in washing for a living or was merely the slave of 20 or 30 grandchildren. Julie had come across to this side. Together they gazed down with a sort of fascination at the sturdy figure below. As he looked at the woman in her characteristic attitude, her thick arms reaching up for the line, her powerful mare-like buttocks, like horse-like, buttocks protruded. It struck him for the first time that she was beautiful. It had never before occurred to him that the body of a woman of 50, blown up to monstrous dimensions by childbearing, then hardened, roughened by work till it was coarse in the grain-like and overripe turnip, could be beautiful. But it was so, and after all, he thought, why not? The solid, contourless body, like a block of granite, and the rasping red skin bore the same relation to the body of a girl as the rose hip to the rose. Why should the fruit be held inferior to the flower? She's beautiful, he murmured. She's a meter across the hips easily. That's her style of beauty. He held Julia's supple waist easily encircled by his arm. From the hip to the knee, her flank was against his. Out of their bodies, no child would ever come. That was the one thing they could never do. Only by word of mouth, from mind to mind, could they pass on the secret. The woman down there had no mind. She had only strong arms, a warm heart, and a fertile belly. He wondered how
do you know she has no mind?
Yeah.
wondered how many children she'd given birth to.
That's crazy.
Top of 220.
Also, Julia immediately going, her hips are a meter wide. Okay, girl, damn. You didn't have to do all of that.
Bro, you clocked her. What about
Oh
girls?
god.
What about girls?
Girls supporting girls.
Right? What happened to that?
Dude, she is not a
Julia,
girl.
yeah.
Julia's not a girl's
Julia
girl.
is not a girl's girl in the slightest.
Guys,
She literally hates other women.
is this a reference
She's
to my
perfect for
essay?
Winston.
Is this a reference to my essay where I tell Tigan that Julia's a femcel, a pick me?
Well, yeah. Yes, we know this.
He wondered how many children she might have bore. Top of 220. It might easily be 15.
Oh,
Ew.
you don't know how people
no.
work, Winston.
That's
you.
You don't know how people work, I think.
He doesn't know the female.
He doesn't know anything about reproduction,
Well, I
honestly.
mean, they're not
They-
taught, I
It
guess,
wouldn't be
so.
something that they'd be taught, truly.
She had had her momentary flowering, a year perhaps,
No, it's artificial.
of wild rose beauty, and then she had suddenly swollen like a fertilized fruit and grown hard and red and coarse. And then her life had been laundering, scrubbing, darning, cooking, sweeping, polishing, mending, scrubbing, laundering, first for children, then for grandchildren, over 30 unbroken years. At the end of it, she was still singing. The mystical reverence that he felt for her was somehow mixed up with the aspect of the pale, cloudless sky stretching away behind the chimney pots into interminable distances. It was curious to think that the sky was the same for everybody, in Eurasia and East Asia as well as here. And the people under the sky were also very much the same, everywhere, all over the world, hundreds or thousands or millions of people just like this.
You're giving her a whole life and backstory. Like, dude, she's a person. She did live a life.
People ignorant of one another's existence, held apart by walls of hatred and lies, and yet almost exactly the same. People had never learned to think, but were storing up in their hearts and bellies and muscles the power that would one day overturn the world. If there was hope, it lay in the proles. Without having read to the end of the book, he knew that that must be Goldstein's final message. The future belonged in the proles, and could he be sure that when their time came, the world they constructed would not be just as alien to him, Winston Smith's, as the whole world of the party? Yes, because at least it would be a world of sanity. Where there is equality, there can be sanity. Sooner or later it would happen. Strength would change into consciousness. The proles were immortal. You could not doubt it when you looked at them, at that valiant figure in the yard. In the end, their awakening would come. And until that happened, though it might be 1,000 years, they would stay alive against all odds, like birds passing on from body to body the vitality which the party did not share and could not kill. Top of 221. Do you remember the thrush that sang to us the first day at the edge of the wood? He wasn't singing to us. He was singing to please himself. Not even that. He was just singing. The birds sang, the proles sang, the party did not sing. All around the world, in London and New York, in Africa and Brazil, and in the mysterious forbidden lands beyond the frontiers, in the streets of Paris and Berlin, in the villages of the endless Russian plain, in the bazaars of China and Japan, everywhere stood the same solid, unconquerable figure, made monstrous by work of childbearing, toiling from birth to death, and still singing. Out of those mighty loins a race of conscious beings must one day come. You were the dead. Theirs was the future. But you could share in that future if you kept alive the mind as they kept alive the body and passed on the secret doctrine, the 2 + 2 make 4.
Wait, how many times are they gonna say trolls are the future and the only thing good? And how many times are they gonna say about the 2 + 2 is truly 4 and not 7?
We are the dead. We are the dead? Echoed Julia dutifully. You are the dead, said an iron voice behind them. They sprang apart. Winston's entrails seemed to have turned into ice. He could see the white all around the irises of Julia's eyes. Her face had turned a milky yellow. The smear of rouge that was still on each cheekbone stood out sharply, almost as though unconnected with the skin beneath. You are the dead, repeated the iron voice. It was behind the picture, breathed Julia. It was behind the picture, said the voice. Remain exactly where you are. Make no movement until you are ordered. It was starting at last. They could do nothing except stand gazing into one another's eyes, to run for life, to get out of the house before it was too late. No such thought occurred to them. Unthinkable to disobey the iron voice from the wall. There was a snap as though a catch had been turned back, and a crash of breaking glass. The picture had fallen to the floor, uncovering the telescreen behind it. Now they can see us, said Julia. Now we can see you. Stand out in the middle of the room. Stand back. Stand back to back. Clasp your hands behind your heads. Do not touch one another. They were not touching, but it seemed to him that he could feel Julia's body shaking, or perhaps it was merely the shaking of his own. He could just stop his teeth from chattering, but his knees were beyond his control. There was a sound of trampling boots below, inside the house and outside. The yard seemed to be full of men. Something was being dragged across the stones. The woman's singing had stopped abruptly. There was a long rolling clang as though the wash tub had been flung across the yard, and then a confusion of angry shouts which ended in a yell of pain. The house is surrounded. The house is the house is surrounded. He heard Julia snap her teeth together. I suppose we may as well say goodbye. You may as well say goodbye, said the voice, and then another quite different voice, a thin, cultivated voice with which Winston had the impression of having heard before. Do you guys need to move? It's like really, really, really constant. And it's just like total. It seems like you're not talking about the book, which I've let go for quite a while here. But when people around the room are looking, it's starting to get hard to listen. And we're kind of at a inflection point in the story.
It's a very big moment.
I suppose we may as well say goodbye. You may as well say goodbye. And then another quite different voice, a thin, cultivated voice which Winston had the impression of having heard before, struck in. And by the way, while we are on the subject, here comes a candle to light you to bed. Here comes a chopper to chop off your head. Something crashed into the bed behind Winston's back. The head of a ladder had been thrust through the window and had burst in the frame. Someone was climbing through the window. There was a stampede of boots up the stairs. The room was full of solid men in black uniforms with iron-shod boots on their feet and truncheons in their hands. Winston was not trembling any longer. Even his eyes had barely moved. He barely moved. One thing alone mattered: to keep still. To keep still and not give them an excuse to hit you. A man with a smooth prizefighter's jowl in which the mouth was only a slit paused opposite him, balancing his truncheon meditatively between his thumb and forefinger. Winston met his eyes. The feeling of nakedness, with one's hand behind one's head and one's face and body all exposed, was almost unbearable. The man protruded the tip of a white tongue, licked the place where his lips should have been, and then passed on. There was another crash. Someone had picked up the glass paperweight from the table and smashed it to pieces on the hearthstone. The fragment of coral, a tiny crinkle of pink like a sugar rosebud from a cake, rolled across the mat. How small, thought Winston, how small it always was. There was a gasp and a thump behind him, and he received a violent kick on the ankle which nearly flung him off his balance. One of the men had smashed his fist into Julia's solar plexus, doubling her up like a pocket ruler. She was thrashing about on the floor, fighting for breath.